Hi guys, I hope you're all well. In this video I want to discuss the importance of being very careful with individuals that preach this. If it works for me, it will work for you. And unfortunately I think this is very common within the fitness industry about 3 or 4 years ago, where instead of people looking at the weight of available scientific evidence and then using that to guide their practice, people used to just basically give out information which worked for them. And unfortunately that's where you can run into problems, because you start doing things that really aren't necessary, that just add to stress, that add to time, that don't actually help you achieve better results. I'm going to give a couple of examples within this video. However, for the most part I think the industry is certainly moving in the right direction. I think for the most part it's moving towards more of an evidence-based approach, as I said, using science, using the weight available evidence to guide practice, which is certainly a big positive. But be very careful of people preaching this, oh, works for me or work for you, because as I mentioned, you end up doing things that you really don't need to get the same results. So a great example of this is meal frequency. So let's say, for example, someone is preaching eating 6 to 8 meals per day because it works for me, therefore it will work for you, or that's what they'll say. But the reality is we now know that with regards to fat loss, meal frequency does not have an impact on your metabolic rate. It doesn't matter how many meals you're eating, as long as calories and macronutrients are matched. So if you had 8 meals per day versus 3 meals, if calories and macronutrients were matched for the same individual, the results will be no different. And that's a great example of you following someone else's advice because it worked for them, but you're actually doing more than you need to do to get the exact same result. Another great example is people saying that you need to have a meal immediately after your training programs. This is something I've spoken about in detail many times before. There's a few things we need to consider here. Firstly, when is the next training bout? So for example, those that train twice per day, i.e. endurance trainees, it is important to consider nutrient timing between session 1 and session 2 for these individuals. However, for most people training 24 hours away and even further away than that, then glycogen will take care of itself by default as long as sufficient carbohydrates are met. So that's the next thing to consider. The next thing to consider would be protein. We obviously need protein to halt protein breakdown and stimulate muscle protein synthesis. However, if you have a meal prior to the training bout, approximately within 2 hours prior to training, containing at least protein, you have amino acids being absorbed during the session and after the training bout again. So this puts that need for having that meal immediately after training. Additionally, with regards to the insulin spike people talk about, this will happen by default just by having pre-workout meal containing at least protein or carbohydrates. It's important to know that protein is also insulinogenic as well as carbohydrates. So again, that puts into context the need for that meal immediately after training. So that's another great example. Someone will preach you must eat after the training, yet again, if you were to have that same meal, say 2 hours after the training bout with a pre-exercise meal, the result would be the same as the person having their meal immediately after training. So that's the biggest thing with this, if it works for me or work for you, is you're doing a lot of things that aren't really necessary within the context of someone just training once per day and has goals of building muscle or losing body fat. So hopefully that's been useful. Just be cautious of people preaching that mindset. Look out for individuals who have more of an evidence-based approach using science to guide their practice. That's certainly a more optimal approach to take. So hopefully you enjoyed the video. I like it. If you've enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I look forward to speaking to you soon. Take care.